Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. I appreciate you all joining us for this last minute presentation. We are going to be going over the recently enacted HERO Act. Now, any board members who are attending this live presentation will automatically receive your 3 educational credits. You will see that in approximately 1 week. And we will also be recording this webinar, so we will post it to the website in a couple of weeks, and board members and staff can view it at that time as well. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Bill Keefe, our Executive Director. Thank you.
Thanks, Natasha. Nothing like a little computer issue at 12:57, but we did the best that we could, scrambled, and here we are. So hello, everyone. Very glad to have you join us today. Hope you are enjoying the end of summer. Hard to believe kids are going back to school and Labor Day weekend is upon us. I thought the Red Sox might keep things interesting into September, but they've taken a recent slide reminiscent of my years growing up. At least the Patriots are starting up soon. We have the Bruins and Celtics not too far behind anyway. The end of the formal legislative session was very busy for retirement matters, as you have seen with 3 memos in the last couple of weeks on anti-spiking changes and salary usage in setting post-retirement public sector earnings limitations, in addition to veterans buyback. And I'm going to rip the Band-Aid right off. You may know that we have 2 more memos to come on legislation. The new Section 7 100% violent assault disability for police officers, firefighters, and EMTs, and changes to return to service. The violent assault disability does not take effect until October 29th, which is 90 days after the effective day of the act, and we are continuing to work through that. The return to service changes require us to change a number of forms, and we're working on that also. And memos on both matters will be forthcoming, as will a second webinar on all the non-veterans legislation. Just while I have you, I want to mention our emerging issues coming up Wednesday, September 18th at the Westboro Doubletree, different venue this year. After many years of Holy Cross, for whatever reason, Holy Cross wouldn't honor the state contract. It's not our language, state language. So we'll be at the newly renovated Westboro Doubletree. Patrick will be speaking on veterans again and other legislative matters. We have a panel on AI with Paul Andrews of the CFA Institute, the Chartered Financial Analyst Institute, and Tony Falzone of Prim. And Evan Horowitz, an economist at Tufts, will speak on the state of the state economy. And we also have an administrators roundtable with Eric Cohen from New Bedford, Dennis Gallagher of Braintree, Rachel Grimaldi from Worcester Regional, and Erica Glaster from Teachers. Tuesday, November 19th will be our next administrative training in Danvers. And then in the spring, we'll have Norwood. Coming back to veterans, this is something that has been worked on for several years. There have been too many veterans unable to take advantage of buying back the military service, a benefit they earned and deserve. The statutory 180-day limit for veterans buyback was way too short and not practical. Between finances, a stable home address, career choices, and a host of other issues and adjusting to life after the service, it just didn't make sense. While some boards were generous in providing more time, it has not been that way across the board, and geography influenced how this benefit was applied. So in order to level the playing field and ensure all veterans in public service are able to take advantage of a veterans buyback equally, we've been pursuing changes to the statute. They were ultimately signed into law on August 8th as part of the HERO Act. This was a team effort, and there are many people to thank. Governor Maura Healey, Lieutenant Governor Kim Driscoll, and Veterans Secretary John Santiago for filing the HERO Act and including these veterans buyback provisions. Senator John Velas and Representative Jerry Paracella, both veterans, for filing the original bills. Senator Velas for doing yeoman's work shepherding this through the process as a Senate chair of the Veterans Committee, along with his House counterpart, Jerry Cassidy. House Public Service Chair Ken Gordon for doing a lot of the heavy lifting and being there every step of the way, along with his Senate counterpart, Mike Brady. To the veterans organizations, police and fire unions, mass retirees, and MACRIS for lending their considerable support, and to many of you viewing today for doing the same. And to my friend and predecessor, John Parsons, and your host today, Patrick Charles. who identified the veterans buyback issue several years ago and drafted the initial language. So we understand there are some significant changes. We're here to work with you. We're here to support you and answer any questions. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Assistant Deputy Director Patrick Charles.
Thank you, Bill. As Bill mentioned, we're discussing the HERO Act, which was recently signed into law and makes significant changes to the Veterans Benefits Buyback provisions in Chapter 32. But first, I want to start by going over just very briefly some things that are not changing, some sort of rehash, sort of the benefits in general, but also some of the existing statutory provisions that will not change by this. So first, the definition of veteran has not changed. So you still have to have the 180 days of credit of military service or 90 days, one of which is wartime. National Guard and reserves training time does not count towards that activation period. They must actually be activated into service, non-training, in order to qualify as a veteran. Still the purchase of 4 years of military service, and that can be a combination of active military time prior to your employment. It can also include, if you're National Guard or reservist, time at a 5-to-1 ratio that overlaps with your creditable service in the system. The salary to use is still 10% of the regular comp when the member most recently established membership in the system. This is on another slide, but I'm just going to keep highlighting it. It's the salary when they most recently entered the system. If a person started in one system, then left and withdrew their funds, and then comes into a second system, you use the salary at the second system. However, if they simply left employment in the first system and transferred their funds, you use the salary from the first system, which means that if they are purchasing the service in the second system, the first system will have to provide the salary figure through payroll records or some sort of record of the contributions that were made during that year so that the second system can calculate the buyback amount. As I mentioned, 5-to-1 ratio for National Guard and active reserve time. And we highlight this, you must still qualify as a veteran. I can't tell you how many people I have seen come in or email asking about their veteran status who may have 10 years in the National Guard or 10 years in the reserves, but the only active duty they've ever served is during training, and we have to tell them that they are not a veteran. You must meet the minimum qualifications for veterans under the definition in Chapter 4 in order to qualify. Active duty leave time cannot be counted towards your buyback. So if you are in the National Guard or the reserves and you are in year 3 of your employment with the city, and then you go on active duty for 11 months or a year, when you come back, you get creditable service for that. So when you submit that DD 214 to show that you're a veteran, or when that member submits it to the board, they cannot use that time in order to actually make a purchase of creditable service. So they would submit a document to show how much military service they had, how much to get the 5-to-1 ratio, and you would subtract out any active duty time that they were already getting creditable service for. And the last point to make on that is this all applies to only members in service. And that has always been the case with veterans. It's one of the buybacks that require a person to be a member in service in order to take advantage of that buyback. That has not changed, and which also means that anyone that was denied the buyback at previous time who is no longer active is still not going to be able to take advantage of these new provisions. Just mentioned the prior active duty and National Guard leave. You are going to be eligible for prior active duty of less than 4 years sometimes. You may have been in the military for 2 years and then switched into a reserve role. You can buy that 2 years right away if you're a member in service. But then you could also qualify for additional time at the 5-to-1 ratio if at some point you get enough service time to get that 5-to-1 ratio and get another 2 years, say. So you would actually be possible that you could do 2 buybacks. Under the new requirements, you may not do that. You may want to wait. If they're a member, the member may wait and do that as long as they satisfy the requirements for the timeliness later on by qualifying for the full 4-year purchase. Next. So again, just to highlight this because it has not changed, it's 10% of the annual regular comp of the member when they entered the retirement system. If they withdrew funds from one system and then they come in to buy in the second system, you use the salary in the second system. If there's a transfer, you use the salary in the first system. One of the questions that I often get asked about this 10% of the regular annual compensation, If the member comes in, starts your system, and a month after they've started, they want to make the military service purchase, this was obviously much more common when the 180-day issue was in play, but it still might be a case where someone wants to purchase immediately. And if they do, you can annualize the salary. You do not have to wait for them to serve 1 full year and take the regular comp that they had contributed on. You may annualize the salary based on what they received at basically when they were hired. Next. This is really just here for your informational purposes. This is the important parts of definition of who qualifies as a veteran. I mentioned before the 90 days, one of which is wartime service. Wartime service is pretty much all service at this point because the Persian Gulf, according to the statute, has never ended. The Persian Gulf veteran applies all the way through because there's never been a resolution of Congress adopted to end that, and our statute has never been updated to change the date for that. So basically anyone that served since the early 90s is considered a veteran with wartime service. Next. These are just some mandatory provisions. For instance, in 41H, the first 3 paragraphs talk about mandatory credible service for when someone is an active employee and they get called up to go on active duty. And then there's USERA, which provides for certain benefits that are required by the federal government. So now we've covered the basic background. Obviously, that is not an exhaustive topic of the veterans buyback in its entirety. That I have done the previous webinar. That's about an hour long that is on our website. And basically, most of that is still relevant and valid. The only parts that are not are the purchase timeframe requirements and then some of the notice requirements that are included in the HERO Act. So the HERO Act is an act honoring, empowering, and recognizing our service members and veterans. It rewrites section 41H, the 4th paragraph, which is the actual buyback paragraph. Previously to this, the 180-day notice was not included in chapter 32. There was actually no notice requirement and no buyback time frame included in chapter 32, which made it very confusing to people. When they looked at the chapter, saw the paragraph on the buyback, they were very confused as to why is the board telling me I have 180 days. That was all contained in Chapter 71 of the Acts of 1996. It was amended and there was an extension in 2002. However, that 180-day requirement has always been included in a special act and not in Chapter 32. We don't have to worry about that anymore because one of the things that this HERO Act did was eliminated the 180-day requirement in its entirety. One of the other really important things that this changes, that's why it's bolded here, is this new Section 41H paragraph requires that the boards give notice of potential benefits to all new employees. So if you've read our memo 23 of 2024, what we're telling boards to do is to basically give the notice of potential benefits form from our website, and I believe we also attach it to the memo when we sent it out. Give that to every employee when they sign up for the system. When you enroll a new member in the system, make sure that they are given that form, given that document, because that document as a first page that basically explains the veteran benefit, and then the second page is the actual application. So we want every member to be given that at the beginning. It's now a requirement in the statute that all new members be given that notice. The second thing that the HERO Act does of significance here is it changes that 180 days and provides that you have to make the purchase or make arrangements for the purchase and begin the payment plan if the board allows an installment plan. You have to begin that within 1 year of vesting, essentially 11 years of creditable service. The important thing to note here is it's 11 years of creditable service. It's not 11 years from the day you started in the system. Someone may have other buybacks that they have done, and that will count towards your 11 years because it is 11 years of creditable service, not 11 years of membership time. The National Guard and the Reserves have a different purchase window, which I'll go over in a few slides. The reason they have a different window is basically because not all National Guard and Reservists will be qualified as a veteran by the time they vest or within 1 year. As I mentioned before, you may have someone that's been in the Guard or Reserves for 10, 15 years before they get activated and get the full enough time of active duty to qualify as a veteran. You may also have a situation where they just don't have enough for the 4-year purchase by 11 years. If someone joins the system and is a member of the National Guard or the Reserves, well, they're not going to have the 5-to-1 ratio time in 11 years. You need to get to at least 20 years in the Guard or Reserves if you're going to do a straight 5-to-1 ratio to get your 4 years. So they have a different window. And the last thing, and this is the one that is going to be most important right off the bat, and it will have a number of slides devoted to it. There's a new 1-year window for anyone who missed purchasing their service. So these are the people that either missed the 180 days, say they never got notice, just decided that they weren't going to do it. It's any reason they did not make their purchase and they are eligible for that purchase, they will have a new 1-year window to do that. Next. So this slide is just a paragraph 41H that was amended and completely rewritten. And you'll see in bold all of the specific changes that were made. First being that written notice must be provided by the retirement board of this benefit to anyone entering service. And even if your member is transferring from one system to another, you should still give them this notice. Just do it to anyone that is joining your system. And you'll see the prior to or within 1 year of vesting pursuant to this chapter. So vesting under Chapter 32, and we explained this in our memo, is 10 years. So within 1 year of that, so within 11 years of creditable service, you must begin the purchase process. That could be either a lump sum payment or an installment plan, but you must enter into one of the two before the end of before the 11th year. And at the bottom, you'll see this new National Guard and active reserve personnel provision for giving them a different time frame to use. It's a little complicated, but I'll go over that in a couple of slides. Next. So as I mentioned, there's no more 180-day restriction. You no longer have to make arrangements for their military purchase within 180 days. In fact, the member does not even have to declare themselves a veteran within 100 days. The 180 days just is gone. There's no relevance to it anymore. They now have until 1 year after they vest. And as I mentioned here, 10 years of creditable service is the vesting requirement for Chapter 32. So it is effectively 11 years to decide to purchase their military service. This is something that the membership is going to have to track. They are going to have to be aware of their own creditable service. Obviously, the boards are tracking creditable service in some fashion through their systems, but the member is also going to have to know they got this notice when they started, but they're going to have to, it's going to be on them essentially. We're not expecting every board on the day that someone reaches 10 years to say, hey, by the way, you vested, you got a 1 year window to do it. I mean, that in an ideal world would be fantastic. I don't anticipate that every system could do that, especially with larger systems. I just don't see that as feasible, but if a system can do it, great. Next. So I want to go over the National Guard and reservists first. They can purchase up to 4 years of time like all other service members, but they have an additional time to make that purchase. So for instance, as I mentioned before, if you don't qualify as a veteran before you begin service, but you qualify at some point during your service, then you will have the later of two dates, either 5 years from when you qualify as a veteran or 5 years from the date that they qualify for the full 4 years of purchase. So there is a scenario in which someone could join the system, join the reserves right after they join the system, and it could be it could be 20 years before they reach enough service time. It could be, in fact, more than 20 years in order to purchase the 5-to-1 ratio to get to the full 4 years. Because one, they will have to be activated at some point during their membership service. And so that would qualify them as the veteran under Chapter 4, but then they have to get to the full 4 years of purchase. You may also have someone who qualifies earlier than that, in that they may have, again, like I mentioned previously, you could have someone that came in with 2 years of military service. So they already have 2. So they really only need to get 10 years of Guard or Reserve service. They may have had prior Guard and Reserve service prior to when they started. So it's really going to be different for every member. Some of them may simply fall under the original 11 year because they may come into the system later in life and already qualify as a veteran and already have close to the 4 years. They just need a little bit of Guard or Reserve time added. So it's going to be different for basically every National Guard and reservist, which is one of the necessary features of this, in that we had to address basically all scenarios, the people in particular who didn't qualify by the 11th year, but it then makes it difficult because each individual is going to be different, just the same as every individual who comes in and has to get to the 10 years to vest. They could do that through a combination of service and buybacks, and so they're going to have different windows as well. Next.
Patrick, can I just chime in quickly?
Sure.
I know that we've received this question. We visited boards. Boards will not need to be tracking when somebody vests or when somebody qualifies veteran-wise. It's incumbent on the member. When the member submits their application, then you would verify, like you do in a current buyback, checking DD 214s and dates of application and so forth. So boards do not now need to take that on. It's on the member, and then it would be verified upon the time of application.
That is correct. So I've said before that this 1 year grace period is going to be the thing that's really going to be of importance right off the bat. And that's because there's a lot of time restrictions here that actions need to be taken. So this is for any member in service, again, member in service, who missed the opportunity to purchase their military service prior to the HERO Act. They have a 1 year window from the date the HERO Act was signed to do this, which means they have until August 8th, 2025 to make arrangements to purchase their military service. So this is something that is going to require the boards to take action, and it's all outlined in the memo, but I'll just briefly go over it. Next slide. A member who's already completed their service purchase, they don't need to do anything. If they have already done their military, they can ignore basically anything that the board sends them on this. They already have their military service purchase completed. They have the credible service. They don't need to do anything else. If a member has more than 11 years of credible service and has not completed the buyback, they have until August 8th, 2025 to enter into a purchase agreement with the board. Could be a lump sum or an installment plan, depending on what the board policy is. And some of you have regulations regarding lump sum payments, and some have regulations that specifically authorize installment plans. This is something that the board should need to consider what they're going to do for all of these. We would encourage, in particular for these people that are already out there with more than 11 years and they don't have any sort of leeway up to making this purchase, that they need to do it within a certain period. If you can offer an installment plan, that would be best for the member, hopefully. But this is significant change, because I know that there are a number of boards out there that have had members sign the form within 180 days of membership saying, I'm a veteran, I intend to make my purchase. And then they tell them that they can purchase it at any time prior to retirement. That is no longer allowed. And that's where a lot of these people are going to fall in line with this. They are the people that were told that, and they may have a lot of credible service already. They are going to need to decide whether they're going to make that purchase within the 1 year of by August 8th, 2025. The statute requires that you enter into the purchase by the time that you reach 1 year of vesting. And so you actually have to be making a payment plan or have made the lump sum purchase by the time you reach 11 years. And if you don't qualify under that mechanism here, then you have this 1 year window to do it. If you have less than 11 years of credible service as a member, then you have either when you reach the 11-year credible service mark or August 8th, 2025. So some of your newer members that may have decided that they were a veteran and they were going to eventually buy the time, they may actually have until they reach 11 years. But if they're close to that 11-year mark, then it may be that August 8th is the later of the two dates. Next. So if a member has entered into agreement but has not completed the purchase, these are the members who signed the form. They need to start the process now. They must make the purchase by the time they reach their 11th year or August 8th, whichever date last occurred. So this is going to be where the members are given notice by the boards, and these are the people that are really going to need to pay attention to that notice, because they are going to be under possibly a very restrictive time frame of 1 year. And as it says here, like I said, we encourage installment plans, but it's not required. The statute leaves that as a term and condition of the board. Next slide, please. So what do boards need to do? Well, they have to send notice to all active members of the retirement system that they may be eligible for a military service buyback. We do not want a situation where the board is trying to only identify the veterans in the group, because the fact is you may not know if someone is a veteran. They may have never declared themselves a veteran. They may not have become a veteran until after they entered service and filled out the initial paperwork when they started the system. So just the safest way to ensure that every member who is possibly eligible gets notice is to send it to all active employees. That means that some people that have already made the purchase, they're going to receive it as well. But the notice that we sent that had the sample notice in memo 23, there is a line in there that basically bolded says, if you've already completed your purchase, you don't have to do anything. I'm sure some will still call and ask questions, but we just want to make sure that everyone gets this notice, anyone that is potentially eligible. So that notice must be sent by November 6th of 2024. The statute required that it be sent within 90 days of the effective date of the act, and that means that November 6th, 2024, boards must send this notice. There is a sample notice. I believe we sent it out through Prosper as well in a Word document form or through email, so that you can just cut and paste it, make some changes. In particular, you're going to want to make changes to anything regarding payment plans or payment requirements, whether you require a lump sum, whether you require installment plans, or you allow installment plans. Next slide. So the notice notifies all of these members that who have signed the veterans buyback but never actually made the payment plan or made a payment plan. It tells them that they need to take action. If you have a way of tracking those people, I don't know how each retirement board functions, but if you have a way, sending out another notice to them in particular is a good policy, because some of these people may get confused as to, well, I already signed the form, so maybe I don't need to do anything. But the memo and the sample notice very clearly state that they need to take action, and we don't want to see people miss this opportunity simply because they didn't understand. So if there's a way to contact, great. I know that that's not going to be possible for every board, but I just want to highlight that we're always trying to get as many people as possible to be made aware of this benefit, and if possible, get them to take advantage of it. What other steps do boards need to take? Well, as I mentioned, some of you have board regulations on veterans buyback, and these regulations will have to be reviewed by your board and either repealed or send some updated regulation to PARAC for us to approve, because some of them are obviously not going to be up to date any longer, because there are a number of boards that have regs that require payment within 180 days of being given the notice, and that will be it's ineffective now, so it would have to be repealed. But you may want to update your policy if you also have a policy regarding either lump sum or installment plans. Some boards have varying terms in their installment plans in their regs, and if they want to continue those, that's fine. If there's some other update that needs to be done, send that all in to us, and we will try to do the approval process very quickly. And you immediately should begin using the updated notice of potential benefits forms that are on our website. We have updated them to include provisions from this act, and also just updated all the notice at the beginning of the form that is going to be given and should be given to new members upon entry into the system. And also you'll be using the new form for anyone that does come in based on the notice that you're going to send to the active members. You use the new form for the actual purchase. So I highlight this. I don't usually do these, repetitive notice type deals. But I want to be clear that you must begin giving notice of the military service buyback provision to every new member when they enroll in the system. This is now written into the statute. There was previously the notice requirement, and when you receive notice was part of Chapter 71 of the Acts of 1996. Now it is specifically directly in the statute that notice must be given when every member enrolls in the system. You should provide the updated notice of potential veterans benefits form to every member when they enroll. And basically, you're just including it in whatever new member enrollment packet that you give out to new members. So that is a new requirement. The other notice issue is this 90-day notice. You have to send that out with it by November 6th. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of questions, so I'm going to take those very shortly. I just want you to have my email address here, my phone number. I will be happy to answer any questions, especially if you have a specific question about an individual who's in the process or whether they qualify as a veteran. I often have submitted to me DD-214s, and I'm happy to review those. There's also a link here to the memo 23 of 2024, which you should have all received. And also the Veterans Buyback form, the new version, which has all the updated information. Now we're going to take some questions. Okay, so the first question, what if a member does not submit a DD-214 even though they've been asked? Can they use that as an excuse to bypass the 11 years or 1 year by August 8th? No. The member, if they are a veteran, this timeline is set out in the statute. They have to comply with the timeline, and they have to submit the proper documentation in order to qualify as a veteran. So they need to submit their DD-214. That is the only way that you can certify basically that someone is a veteran and has the, because you need to have the actual credit, the actual service time, active duty service time listed on that DD-214. They may actually have multiple DD-214s as well. Sometimes, especially with Guard and reservists, they need to cobble together the 90 days of wartime, with one of which being wartime, or the 180-day total. And they might have three different DD-214s. I once had a member who had 20 years in the Guard, but he had to submit, I believe it was 11 DD-214s because he used to get activated for 4 to 5 days at a time. And sometimes he'd get maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks because he was a band member. So they need to submit their DD-14s. You cannot, if they don't do it, then they just miss the deadline. If there is no service requirement for Group 4 public safety, are we still applying a 10-year vesting in order for them to purchase? Yes, the 10-year vesting requirement is a requirement under Section 10 of the statute. What this question is referring to is that if you are an active duty employee in Group 4 over a certain age, you do not have to have 10 years to retire, but that does not change the fact that vesting under our statute is 10 years. Should we have new members sign acknowledgement that they received the notice? That's not a bad policy. The fact that you're going to be giving it to every new member sort of de facto serves as a notice, but or proof of notice. But yes, it's not a bad idea to have them sign so that you have a record in their file that I gave you this form on this date when you started service, so you were aware of the period of time that you had to make the purchase and the requirements of the purchase. So this is a specific question. I have an active member currently deployed, never received a DD-214 prior to that. What if he's not back by 8/8/25? Is that an exception? The 8/8/25 date is only for someone who qualifies as a veteran and who did not make the purchase within 180 days. If this person has never received a DD-214 prior, then they would not have qualified as a veteran at this point. I'm assuming this is a National Guard or reservist member, so they would not fall under this 8/8/25 deadline. If they've never qualified as a veteran and they're in the National Guard, they're going to have the 5 years from the date of qualification as a veteran, or 5 years from when they reach the maximum 4-year purchase in order to make the purchase. So I don't believe that this person should have any issue there. Would Parrot consider rewriting the enrollment forms to include the veterans benefit notice? I'm not sure on the answer to that. I'm not familiar with what every provision is in the enrollment forms. And so I'm just not sure if it would work or if it's just best to have it as a separate standalone form. Are you suggesting to send this potential benefits notice out with the buyback notice? So the potential benefits on our website, it's a notice of potential benefits for veterans, and attached to that, the second page is the buyback application. So you'd be sending the notice and the buyback application as one thing to people, or you'd be giving it to them when they enroll in the system as one document. Here's a question on a new member buying their military service on day one of enrollment, work 6 years. If they purchase 4 years, can they retire at 10 years? This is yes. The answer to this is yes, you can. You can vest by making the purchase as well, which is going to impact veterans' disability benefits under ordinary disability. So a member who needs to have 10 years of service to get an ordinary disability, if they worked 6 years and purchased 4 as a veteran, they will be eligible for that as well. So it has a dual impact. It gets them to 10 years and eligible for a superannuation, minimum superannuation, but it also can qualify someone for an ordinary disability retirement. Member who purchased military time prior to this act who did not have 10 years of creditable service, but did get 10 years of service with the military service and then retired, are still properly retired? Question mark. Yes, they are properly retired. There is no issue with that at all. If they have 10 years of creditable service, whether through the buyback or through the accrual of actual membership time, they're eligible for the retirement. Okay. Do we need to keep record that the member is notified for those who do not list they are a veteran but still get the form? As one of the questions mentioned earlier, it isn't a bad policy to have them sign the form saying that they got it when they sign in their regular membership enrollment forms. It's not required. The fact that is that you have to give it to every member when they start, and that is basically proof of notice that every member's new enrollment packet should have that. And so you should have notice or a copy of that they were given that. So I think this question is about whether or not someone has to come up with who did not make the purchase and is now eligible for this new 1-year window. They have to come up with this money by August 8th, 2025. And yes, they have to begin that process and they have to do the purchase by August 8th. The board can allow installment plans. So let's say a person owes $8,000 per year for each year. They might owe $32,000. The board has the option of allowing for a payment plan as long as that payment plan begins before August 8th, 2025 for someone who falls under that 1-year grace window, or someone who was in the situation where they did not complete the buyback before because they just signed the form and weren't required to. They will have that. And now if the board can certainly make it a lump sum requirement, but we would encourage that a board offer a 5-year installment plan to spread that payment out, because we realize that would be a fairly large person.
And to piggyback on that, Patrick, people can use a smart plan rollover. They can withdraw from the smart plan and use that to pay for this if that's within their capabilities.
Yes, you can use rollovers for buybacks, and that would be allowed. Who certifies the validity of the honorable discharge DD 214? I lost my question here. The city, town, veteran service officer. I'm not sure I understand the question. Certifying whether someone is a veteran or determining whether someone meets the veteran definition requirement is something that the retirement board administrator can certainly do. All you need to do is see that the DD 214 contains that the person was honorably discharged, see that what branch of the service they were in and how long they were in on active duty. And if it's a National Guard or reservist, you need to make sure that it doesn't say active duty training on the bottom or some abbreviation for that it's an actual active duty. So that's something that many board administrators can just handle. They don't need to, you don't need a veteran service officer. Obviously, they can certainly weigh in if you have one, but it's not required. Does it need to be part of the enrollment packet? We're talking about the veterans benefits, notice of veterans benefits form, it sounds like. Does it need to be part of the enrollment packet? Because in a regional system, the employer provides those forms and we could not be able to verify that the notice was given. Can we include the notice of potential benefits with the enrollment letter we mailed out to all new members after acceptance by the board? Yes, I would think that's perfectly acceptable. If that's how the system works in terms of that it's an employer that gets all the other forms, and you don't have any sort of proof or guarantee on your own end that notice was sent, then yes, if you send out a new member enrollment letter, then yes, I would certainly think that would qualify. Were veteran departments made aware of this bill, or will it be news to them? This bill was very publicized, so I'm assuming that they are aware of the HERO Act. I don't know how they will be aware of every individual provision. This was a fairly lengthy bill that did a lot of changes to veterans benefits that had nothing to do with Chapter 32 and nothing to do with retirement. So we're not covering any of those things, but there were all sorts of other benefits that veterans get that were included in that bill.
Yes, the State Veterans Affairs Department is doing outreach and will be communicating with their veterans agents about this.
Okay. Is it required to send the form to all members by 11/6/24 or just a letter? So we included in our memo the notice, the sample notice. So that at the very least needs to be sent by 11/6/24. If you want to include the actual application, you can do that, or you can wait until people come in and ask for it, or people send in something to ask for it. I'm not sure how the members will ask for it, but you just need to make sure that the notice, the sample notice, was sent to every active member by the 11/6/24 date. A transfer comes in with a partial buyback for a member. The member only has 4 years of service. Can they complete the buyback prior to reaching 10 years at the new board? Yes, there is no minimum service requirement to make the purchase. A person can come in and make the veterans buyback on day 2 of their employment. There's no waiting to vest. There's no any sort of restriction. It's at any time prior to reaching 1 year after vesting. So this new act forces a veteran member to buy their military service not knowing if they need it or not. Yes, that is essentially correct. I realize that there are going to be some members, in particular if a member goes out for disability, then credible service is really not a factor in that. So the purchase of the service is not required, or it's not helping in terms of the benefit percentage wise, but it is still requirement under the statute that they do that. You can think of it sort of like a member can think of it sort of as an insurance policy, that if they need the credible service, it's there. If they don't, well, that's basically like any other person who does a buyback and doesn't know if they actually need the service when they go to retire.
And by the letter of the law, that's the way it was supposed to be done anyway. The fact that it was done different ways is part of the reason for the statute, to level the playing field for people. Some people got a more member-friendly treatment. which we did not oppose in the least. Others had a harder time. If you followed the letter of the law, you had less time to purchase. So the way that it had been written in statute, you were required to purchase it, not knowing if you needed it or not.
If a member bought, this is a question that we get frequently whenever we do veterans presentations. If a member bought back their military time but ends up not being vested, does the money they spent to buy the military time get returned to the member? If the member takes a return of their deductions, they will get the money back. It'll just be sent back to them as the same as the return of all of their accumulated deductions. They can't just take out the veterans time if they don't need it for their retirement or something. The only way you get this money back that you spend on the purchase is if you get a return of all of your deduction. If the board allows an installment plan, what happens if they do not make all of the payments, return payments, prorate service? So you would prorate the service. You are not required to purchase all of the military service time that you are eligible for. So you can, the statute does not say that you must purchase all of it. It's just that you pay 10% for each year sought. So if they pay you for 2 years, then you give them 2 years. If they pay you for 3, you give them 3, even if they had 4 years. That's just the way it will function under this. Let's see. Our board regulation allow a 5-year installment plan for regular buybacks. Veteran buybacks are not specifically listed in the regulation. Do we need a new regulation that allows veterans buybacks specifically? No, if your policy at the board is for buybacks, and it would really depend on specifically how your regulation is worded, but if your regulation simply says that buybacks, the board will offer a 5-year installment plan, then this would fall under that, in my opinion, and you do not need a specific one. You can adopt a specific one for veterans, but it's not required. Some boards, though, have specific regs regarding buybacks for only veterans benefits, and they're the ones that definitely need to look at them to see if they are still applicable and if any repeal or amendments need to be done. Can the active duty for training be used with the active reserves and National Guard 5-to-1 ratio calculations? Yes, so active duty training still counts towards the 5-to-1. It counts for total time in the Guard or reserves. It simply does not count towards the qualification of the definition of veteran, meeting the minimum 90 days, one of which is wartime, or 180 days of active duty. But it does count towards the 5-to-1 ratio. If a new member turns in the application immediately, does that indicate they will start payments? It is not, that is not specified as a requirement. If they turn in the application, they can, but they have up until they reach the 1 year of vesting to complete the payment. So it's not a requirement that if they sign it on day one.
Or 1 year of vesting, it could be a 5-year plan from there. So it could be up to 16 years.
Yeah, so it's really going to be member specific and up to the board in terms of what sort of payment plan is authorized. Does the member actually have to start paying before the deadline or just sign an agreement? The member must start paying on an agreement before whatever deadline, whether it's the August 8th, 2025 deadline for the 1 year grace period, or whether it's the 1 year of vesting, 11-year creditable service time. They must be in payment, and you could have a payment plan going forward. So you could have longer than 11 years if the board authorizes a payment plan, but they must start paying or be complete, depending on the board, whether they require lump sum or they allow for a payment plan. Would Parrot consider a payment plan that allows 1 year for every year being purchased as a reasonable payment plan for boards to adopt? Certainly, that is a term and condition that the board gets to set. What they do not have to authorize 5-year payment plans. That is just our PERAC has regulations that state that a board can offer a 5-year repayment plan, but it's a term and condition of the board. They decide what sort of payment plan length they want. So if an employee transfers to a wait, sorry, my screen moved here. So if I have a vested member who transfers in from Boston and the member states they were not notified, can the member now purchase the military time? So I'm assuming that this is talking about the 1-year grace period. The 1-year grace period applies to anyone who didn't make the purchase. It doesn't matter whether they were notified, not notified. They have that 1-year grace period to make the purchase under the new requirement, under the new HERO Act provision. So it doesn't matter whether Boston or any other system notified them or not. They have that 1-year window. So if an employee transfers to a new community in the middle of their installment payments, what is the protocol for that? Do they finish payments with the new community? So this has been handled differently over the years, and there has been some case law and some issues where the member is, the board A is required to refund all the contributions, and then you start a whole new purchase in board B. The fact is, the most effective way to do this would simply be to transfer whatever they already paid to system A as part of their deductions that is transferred to system B, and determine how much creditable service that accounted for. And then going forward, you would do a new payment plan for the remainder of it with the new board. The new board sets the terms for that additional payment plan. So if you've already bought 2 years, but you're still owed for 2 years, the second board would determine what sort of plan there was for that 2 years. They could require a lump sum, or they could require a installment plan. Does the veteran notice that has to be sent to all members by 11/6/24 have to be mailed, or can it be emailed? Ideally, it would be mailed to every member. I'm not sure that every board has a email address for members. I know newer employees, I believe that they are asked for their email addresses, but older employees may not have been asked for that, and boards may not have it. So the best bet is to send it to everyone through the mail. I'm not sure. Am I understanding correctly that if one qualifies as a veteran, they can purchase 4 years back if they've completed their service? So a member can purchase up to 4 years of military service as creditable service. I'm not sure about this completed their service. I'm not sure if that's referring to completed their military service or completed their public service, but you have to be an active member in service to make the purchase. So, but as long as you have the 4 years of military service, you have the honorable discharge for that period, you can make that purchase. Can you go over training time again? Regular military can buy, versus reserves cannot buy, or can they buy at 5-1? Is active duty training different than boot camp training, etc.? So for the National Guard and Reserves, active duty training will be specified on their DD 214. It will say that it was active duty training, and that oftentimes is their quote unquote boot camp training. It'll be their initial training, and it will be training time that does not qualify them as a veteran. It will, however, calculate into the 5-1 ratio once they qualify as a veteran. So you could have, if you have 10 years of service in the National Guard and you were activated for the minimum period somewhere in the middle, you may be eligible for that 5-to-1 ratio, so 2 years of creditable service, then the training time just simply counts as part of the total service time. Regular military, their training time, and we'll call it their boot camp time, that is just simply part of their service time in the regular active Army, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, Air Force. So there is no distinction to that. It doesn't get separated out in any way. That is simply part of their active duty service. And it's only the National Guard and Reserves that the training time is relevant. So I have 26 veterans that didn't purchase their vet time. Most of them have about 15 years of service. So if they don't make the full payment by November 6, 2025, they are out of luck, correct? Question mark. Not necessarily. They need to begin making the payments within the 1 year, which is actually, they need to begin making the payments by August 8th, 2025. But if the board allows an installment plan, then that will satisfy that requirement. So they don't actually have to make the full payment by then, unless the board requires a lump sum payment. That is going to be up to the board, terms and conditions of the board. I have one person here who's talking about how they have taken this is an administrator. They've taken the PDFs of the enrollment paperwork, beneficiary forms, 11.2C and option D, statement concerning the job not being covered by Social Security, and the vet's buyback form, and merged them all into one document. And that's what they're distributing to members. And that is certainly a good option if other boards want to do it that way, just to make sure that all possible forms, because there are some of those forms, particularly the Social Security form, must be given also to all new members. You said all early 90s is considered wartime due to Desert Storm, so is training time during that time considered wartime for reserves? No, it is not. The training time is never going to be considered for active duty purposes. The only way a reserve or guardist gets active duty time is if they are activated to duty, and training time does not count. The wartime service during training time is not relevant for training. It's always that the only issue is that it's training. In the transfer situation, the new system picks up the purchase. Does this begin a new time frame, or does the purchase need to be completed immediately? So this falls under the terms and conditions of the board type issue. So if you transfer from one system to the other in the middle, and the board is going to essentially, you're going to purchase the last 2 years of your military time of your 4 with the second system, the board determines whether it's a lump sum payment or whether they're going to allow an installment plan. And they'll still be under the same restriction of the 1 year after vesting, in terms of they need to be in a payment plan by then. So if someone transfers in year 5, they don't need to complete the purchase immediately with the second system. They certainly can, but they don't need to if they had already begun it in system A. But by the time they reach that 1 year vesting, that 1 year vesting is going to be the notice for them. They need to be in a payment plan with system B to finish off that purchase if they intend to make that purchase. Can you notify all active members of the new requirement via a newsletter if sent by the November 6, 2024 deadline? If this newsletter is mailed directly to every individual member and it includes the notice form, then the sample notice that we provided, or a version of that sample notice, then yes, it would, but it needs to be sent to every single member. It can't just be a newsletter that's posted somewhere on the website or something. It has to actually be sent to every individual member. I've been waiting for this question. Silly question, but is the Space Force included in this? Are they considered a branch of the military? So we count the Space Force, even though they are not specified by name in Chapter 4, Section 7, Clause 43rd, they are listed as a department of the Air Force, and so we consider them to be the Air Force for purposes of veterans benefits. So yes, they are included. I have actually not yet seen a DD-214 from someone from the Space Force. I'm waiting anxiously to find one to see if how they're referred, because we've never actually seen. What kind of proof will PERAC auditors be looking for to show that the board mailed notice to all active members? You should have the sample notice that you mail, and it should be the same for every member. So you should have that, and I'm sure that there's some sort of proof that you have that you sent out however many pieces of mail to that would include this notice. I don't know specifically, since we haven't actually audited any of this, I don't know that our auditors have really considered what they're going to look for. So I have a new member that has military time. He signs the notice of potential benefits form. He has to complete the purchase before he is vested at 10 years, or before he is vested, or after 10 years, but before 11 years. I'm confused. Yes. The member has to enter into a payment plan or complete the purchase by the time that they reach 1 year of vesting. So 11 years of creditable service. And this could be 11 actual calendar years, but it could be less if they have prior buybacks of other prior non-membership time or something, or some other buyback that they're eligible for. So it may be less than 11 years, but for many people, it's going to be that 1 year of vesting, which is 11 years.
And that's just to at least enter into the agreement. If the board offers a 5-year plan, then they don't have to complete the purchase for 16 years.
Right. Yes. So that will be dependent. I'm just looking to see if there are any other questions that I may have missed. Wait. Is there a provision for retired members who missed this, who were denied or missed the buyback to apply for this? No, this does not include anyone that is not a member in service. So all retirees that missed the window, they cannot do it. They cannot make the purchase. There's really no mechanism in Chapter 32 for that sort of purchase to be made at this point. They were specifically not included in the HERO Act. Does 10% of salary include all pensionable compensation in first year, stipends, holiday pay? So it is the annual rate of regular compensation upon entry into the system. So whatever that annual rate is, and if that includes known stipends that the person on day one would qualify for, then yes, it would include those. If there are stipends that they don't qualify for immediately, then it's not included in the annual rate of regular compensation. If it's something that they have to qualify for after periods of time, it's not their annual rate when they enter the system. If a member transfers from a board that allows installment payments to a board that does not allow installments, and this transfer date is after 8/8/2025, how long does the member have to pay the remaining balance as a lump sum if they are already past 1 year of vesting? So this is something that the second board has to determine how long they're going to give. There's nothing specified in statute that they must give them, 6 months, or if they've already passed the either the 8/8/25 or they've already passed the 1 year of vesting. So it's something that the second board is going to have to determine whether they need to at least arrange for or make the payment within a specified period. I can't give a more definitive answer than that. Our board grants members double the time to complete their buyback. For example, if the member has 4 years of eligible service, they have up to 8 years to complete their purchase. Is it okay to go up to 8 years for an installment plan? So PARAC has a regulation that states that boards can offer 5-year installment plans unless the board chooses to offer an extended plan. So essentially, yes, we recommend 5-year payment plans, but the board, it's a term and condition, the board can set a longer payment plan. We would be skeptical of, 20-year payment plans or something ridiculous, ridiculously long term. But yeah, that is certainly seems a reasonable plan. I've not ever reviewed one of those, but I don't see that we would have an issue with that. It's a logically set figure. Oh, wait. Another one. If a member is called to active duty while employed and the employer pays full salary and the active duty call up is for more than 4 years, does the credit stop at 4 years? So this is actually getting into not a purchase. This is actually getting into the first 2 paragraphs of 41H, in which a member who gets called to active duty while an active member in the system, they get credible service for the active duty time. And there is a limit of 4 years unless the time is involuntary. And so that is the caveat, that if the time is involuntary. Now, if the person gets called up to active duty and then they decide to go full time from the Guard or reserves into the regular armed forces, so they've decided to switch basically from reserve to active duty full-time, then that would be different than if they are simply called up continuously for various reasons from the Guard or the reserves. They would then, the 4-year would be considered involuntary if they were just repeatedly called up and did not switch, essentially. What if a member complains they never received the new notice of veterans law? Can the retirement board allow a waiver for the member to apply and purchase? The waiver would only be allowed if there was an error of the board, if the board found that they actually did not send the notice. But if the board is sending it to everyone, then the notice requirement has been satisfied and the timelines would still be in place. Does vesting happen on the individual board level? In the example about the transfer a minute ago, wouldn't the member have 1 year from the transfer to start their veteran buyback because they weren't eligible to retire from the second board until they transferred in? I'm not sure I follow the question. The person has until they reach 1 year of vesting, and vesting happens at having 10 years of creditable service. So that's a hard and fast date, regardless of whether 5 years were in one system, 5 years were in another, and the vesting number is still 10 years. Regarding transfer with buyback payment in process, I was under the impression that buybacks cannot be transferred, no proration, or buybacks funds paid by the member refunded upon termination. And then the second board lets the member purchase the veteran service and accept all liability. I believe that is how some boards have processed these in the past, where they have in fact refunded, and then the second system they make the purchase, but other systems I know have transferred. I'm not sure I can be any more specific than that. That's just, I know from sort of anecdotal evidence that that is what has occurred. I believe, wait. We have known bad addresses for active members in our database. Must we include those members in the mailing knowing the addresses are wrong? You need to make a reasonable effort to send a notice to every active member. So either doing a search to try to find a new address or using all the addresses. But the question, I mean, that everybody needs to be provided with this notice. What happens if the member says they never received the notice? The fact is, it's presumed that the member received the notice if you sent it, or obviously in the new examples going forward, the member will be given the notice when they sign up and enroll in the system. So it is presumed that they have gotten the notice because it would have been given to them on when they enrolled. So, I believe that's all of the questions. Just
I
It's
think
like
there
we
were
had-
some questions that came through. A lot of people registered as anonymous attendees. There might have been some questions that either take a little more thought or were a little more specific. Where you're an anonymous attendee, we won't be able to know who it is to reach out. So please feel free to email or phone call with your specific question if it wasn't answered. I do see a couple others that just popped in, Patrick, too.
So we will be incorporating the Vets app with all new member enrollment forms. What if they are a transfer in? I realize they have 11 years from enrollment date to purchase, but with each new board, do they get a new bite at the apple? So I would just give the notice to all members, even when they transfer. And it's, if they've already passed the window, and they're out, so we're not talking about next month, but we're talking a few years down the line when this 1 year window is gone and is no longer really an issue, then I would still include the form, but it's, some of those people just simply aren't going to be eligible because they missed their window with the first board if they had extended careers. We have, I think with the request for transfers taking a very long time from some systems, we do not have proof that they actually have 10 years of service, and the 11th year could have come and gone by the time we actually get their funds transferred. I believe they should still be eligible to purchase the service. So what I would suggest here is if you have a member that comes in and says they want to make the purchase and you're not sure how much time they have with the first system, you should at least begin the process with them. And if they in fact are ineligible because, they already had 12 years of service, they missed their 1 year window and they're no longer eligible, then you would just stop the process and return anything to them. But if they get into the process before they reach the 11th year, that is the key. So, yeah, it makes it a little more complicated for some people, but it's just, you want to make sure that they have the opportunity to do it. And so you sort of have to work with that situation.
And we're certainly hopeful with 10 years rather than 180 days between retirement, dissemination of information, military outreach, the Veterans Affairs outreach, whether it's veterans organizations. We certainly hope that there'll be enough communication within 10 years that we won't be coming up against it as much as we did with 180 days. $11 years, I should say.
Again, does the notice have to be mailed or can it be emailed? It should be mailed to all parties. Certainly email if you have that as well. That is obviously a good mechanism if you have email addresses, but you won't necessarily have email addresses for all members, and not every board will have them. So, and that seems to be the last real question to answer here. So, this webinar will be posted online for review in a week or two, I think. The memo, you have the memo 23, you have the sample notice included in that. Also, the new veterans form is available on our website. And the last slide of this presentation has my email address, which is patrick.m.charles@mass.gov. You can certainly email me with any questions or give me a call at 617-591-8914, especially if you have specific member questions that I maybe didn't answer here or that are a little tricky individuals, or if you need some help with DD-214s or any of the NGB-22 forms, or there's a lot of various forms that veterans may come in with, and I'm happy to explain that. Also, you can review the previous webinar on veterans benefits that I've done in the past that is on our website, because that goes into more detail in particular on the various forms that you may see. So. Oh, we do have one more quick question. Can you send out the webinar booklet? I believe so, yes. Thank you all for attending, and let me know if you have any questions or issues going forward with this.
Thank you, everybody. And Natasha did say she was going to email out the presentation to everybody. And Patrick will also be speaking on this at Emerging Issues, if you'd like to come to that. And there will be another webinar forthcoming on other non-veteran legislative changes. So unless, Natasha, do you have anything else you need to wrap up with?
No, that you guys covered it. I'll email the booklet, the form, and credits will be updated in accounts within a week. Thank you, everyone.